Welcome back to another episode of Flipping the Lid. You know what we do here, and I love to dig deep to get into the truth behind the stories that have shaped some of the most significant, successful people creating impact in this world. Today, one of my favorite humans. I met her a few years ago, and instantly, when she was on stage, I felt the energetic connection. I felt the charisma. I felt the love, and I felt every element of the authenticity and vulnerability flowing through this woman. She is a strength. She's an embodiment of what's possible. She sets standards for herself to design the life that she decides and has had massive business success. Her and her husband founded what started as a small business in their home and became an international company called Pudge that changed the lives of parents and the way they interacted with their kids through amazing products that made life as a mom and a parent more simple. And this individual has grown and dug deep in her own life to be able to stand in a position where she's elevating and empowering people at a massive level to stand into the lives that they want to design for themselves. So, Katie, I am so happy you're here today.
Brian Bogert, super excited to be here. We're going to flip the lid. We're going to go deep. You know that I don't like surface conversations. When we go deep, we get at the core and we get right where things actually make a difference. So I'm excited to talk to you today. Thanks for having me.
So I told you a little bit about who you are, right? You're a mother and a wife and a successful businesswoman and a strength in so many beautiful ways. How would you describe who you are?
I am curious about life and a creator. And I think that combination of curiosity and creativity and really, as I move through my life, I start to gain new perspective, right? I get to new levels. And all of a sudden, what I thought was the top isn't the top. And so I'm somebody who's constantly learning to dream bigger. And I've watched that happen throughout my life. When I started, I described myself as just a stay-at-home mom. And then I dared to dream to be an entrepreneur. And, I got into like 25 stores and I was like, wow, cool. That's like greater than I ever imagined. And then pretty soon I was in 2,000 stores and then in 26 different countries. So I've learned to play this game of continuing to have a greater vision and to really begin to wonder what actually is possible if I just keep going.
Mm. And I know there's lots and lots and lots of moments in your life that you had to just keep going. There was moments that I know that you wanted to stop, that you were feeling like you couldn't move, but let's not jump into that just yet. Okay. I would love to know a little bit about your childhood. And I know I have a little bit of stories that I already have understanding on, but I'd love for you to talk about how your creativity was manifested as a child and the way that you were able to move in your family and neighborhood to learn to express yourself or hide regardless of the moment.
Yeah, so I grew up in a family of 6. When I was 3, my mom had twins. And even though there's technically not a middle in 6 kids, I was very much the middle child, meaning I kind of had this autonomy and freedom and invisibility in my family. I didn't create problems or trouble for my parents. And so I was kind of a good girl. And because of that, I was given a lot of freedom and not really paid close attention to. And so it had this double-edged sword. I had a lot of freedom to go and explore my neighborhood. Can you imagine a young girl in a cul-de-sac where, great families, safe neighborhood. I'm in my swimming suit, bare feet, just running from friend's house to friend's house, swimming, riding my bike, playing, and having a lot of freedom to explore. And I grew up in a home where creativity was really encouraged. My mom is a sewer, a painter, an artist. She would do a lot of home fix-it projects. And same with my dad. Like he had a lot of power tools in the garage and there was lots of scrap wood and so I was given the freedom to go learn how to use the radial arm saw and the jigsaw and the drill press. And that led me to studying something at university that I think was kind of unexpected for everybody in my family. I was a couple years into university and all my previous siblings had studied English. And guess what? Like English it was just a have to. It was not something I wanted to do. And so I was 2 years into school and feeling really disoriented, feeling like I don't fit in here. And I started to wonder if I needed to leave university and go to a trade school because I
Mm,
just wanted to make things. And I had taken all of these kind of extracurricular type classes like woodworking, welding, pottery, figure drawing. They weren't leading towards a major in English, that's for sure. And I I just started to wonder if I just didn't fit in. And luckily, I met this woman who she was a counselor in the building that I was taking woodshop classes from. And she pulled me into her office and she was just like, tell me more about you. What are you doing? And you're not a tech ed major like a lot of the other students here in the building. So like, what is it you want to do? And I kind of confessed to her how I just don't really fit in. And what I want to do is design and build furniture. Like that just seemed like the ultimate to me at the time. And usually people didn't know what to do with me when I said that, especially at a university.
yeah.
And she was like, "You need to be an industrial designer." And I was like, "What? Like designing factories?" And she was like, "No, no, no, no." And she explained to me what industrial design is and how it's product design. And she was like this angel who just showed up right when I needed and was ready for it. And long story short, she took me over to the professors who were in charge of industrial design. And it turns out they have like this really long qualification process. You have to take all these prerequisites. And then, even then, you have to apply with like hundreds of other students. And they admit, I don't know, like 9 students a year. It's a really, really elite program. And I'm already 2 years in and I just missed the application. So that would be like 3 years before I can even apply. And again, like I'm a woman of God and faith, and I really feel like these people were placed in my life in the moments when I needed them. And long story short, I meet the man who's in charge of the whole program, and I have a conversation with him. I show him the plans for a really big dresser that I'm building from scratch out of wood, and he was like, "Looks great, Katie. Let's get you in the program." And walks me to his secretary, and they signed me up for the program. I'm like, "What just happened?" And all of a sudden, I'm thrown into this program where like I'm learning to be an inventor. And I was like, I didn't know
Mm,
this is what I was signing up for. But long story short, Brian, like I end up thriving in this program. I get a scholarship from General Motors. I win national furniture design awards. I end up representing the university. And like for that young girl, oh, this gets me emotional, who felt invisible in the world.
hmm.
Like that was a big moment in my life.
I'm really happy you took it there, by the way. I was going to ask you that question because when you feel isolated, when you don't feel like you're getting the attention, right?
Yeah.
Talk about what you experienced, whether it was conscious or unconscious at the time, through your childhood and development. And then I have a very specific question as it relates to like when you started to be seen and understood. So talk about the background, isolation, disconnection, not a lot of attention. What was your experience through all that and how did you feel it?
It was interesting because I think it was more feelings than it was thoughts and
Of course.
understandings. Yeah. Um, God, at a young age, I lived in a great home and, parents who took really good care of me. But I think they didn't have an understanding of how to connect with me emotionally. This is kind of my awareness as now a 42-year-old woman reflecting back. And they probably have reasons why they weren't very emotionally connected to me.
Mhm.
But it was interesting because I could watch as my older siblings and even my younger siblings, like they captured my parents' attention in a way that I couldn't seem to capture, and I didn't understand it. And externally it looked like life was perfect, amazing, and that I should be happy. And I was a really happy child, but I would have these moments, Brian, where I don't even know what would set it off, but I would just start crying
Mm.
and I would just be really sad. And I didn't
We,
know why.
that was what I was going to ask is if you knew why at the time.
I had no idea. No idea. And I think, I've studied a little bit on attachment theory and that need to feel connected. And I didn't have an emotional connection to my parents.
And you and I've talked about that in depth as
Yeah.
well in other conversations in our friendship. And it was very clear that that was something that really did shape a lot of who you were in your early foundational years. Just, we call it the
Yeah.
trash from people's past, right? And it's like, until you
Yeah.
identify and understand it and remove it, you don't really know the treasure that was formed by that trash pressure, and you don't get to move through the stuff that's keeping you stuck.
Totally.
And to not have conscious awareness around why you're feeling sad, and sadness is a heavy, dark emotion. What
Yeah.
thoughts and narratives were created by this feeling that you had no known source to at the time?
Uh-huh. I frequently felt alone, even though, again, I was one of 6 kids. There were almost always people around. Internally, I felt very alone. I felt different. I felt invisible. And I interpreted a lot of those things also as I don't matter, that I'm not one of the important people in the room.
Mm,
And that not only am I invisible, that's my place. And
mhm.
that's where I need to stay and be. And so I got very good at people pleasing because it helped me stay more invisible. If I didn't cause a problem, then I was fitting into my place of being invisible.
Yeah, and it's also so much about directing attention to other people, caring for them to divert attention from you. And then wherever you're trying to get attention, it's typically through some level of validation and performance to receive love and connection, which is really all you wanted in the first place, right?
Yeah. And so without realizing it, I was doing things, more quiet things, but I was doing things to try and gain
Yeah.
attention. And I was developing as a young artist, and I would sit in my room and I would draw for hours. I would go into the garage and kind of tinker around with wood and wire, and I would make things like picture frames or a lamp. And I even would kind of follow my mom around, and I would peer over her shoulder as she was sewing. And then when she
Mm,
wasn't looking, I would sneak into the sewing room and I would cut up some fabric and make something, and then show her later. But I didn't want to bother her and be a burden on her because she was busy. She had a lot that was on her plate. And so I was trying to do these things in a way that it wasn't burdensome. I played the piano, but I didn't know how to read music. And so I just figured out how to create the songs that were in my
yeah.
heart. And just constantly, it was this game of just figuring out how to do things on my own because I felt pretty on my own.
Yeah, and at some point you start to believe that you have to do it alone because you feel alone, and it's difficult to like really move through that. So I just want to thank you, my friend, for going to a very vulnerable place right out of the gate.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting anything other than that from you because you're always so real and we always have these magical conversations. But it's been a minute, and for you to jump right there just is a testament to how far you've come as well. So go back to college, okay?
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden you feel like, again, you're still alone, you're still disconnected, you don't feel like you fit in the program, but there was one woman who saw you, who took a little bit more time to make you feel safe and protected, to make you feel seen and understood, and to feel connected at such a deep level. And that just little blip of light pushed you into action that opened up this whole other avenue in your world. Can you talk
Yeah.
about what it felt like the moment that you felt seen? And when she asked you that question, given that you were ready to change the trajectory of your life in that moment?
At first, when I started to feel seen, I think my reaction was, is this safe? Like, is this
Mm,
okay? Because being invisible was always safe. And so at first it feels a little bit intimidating, but at the same time, it's very satisfying and
mhm.
validating. And so, yeah, that was exciting to have her recognize my brilliance
Which is
when
exactly what
maybe
it is.
I couldn't. And like, I remember having just before that, I remember having this conversation with my roommates, and the way I described myself was a good for nothing. Like, I'm kind of good at a lot of things.
Mm. Hmm. It can be intrusive when we first get seen. We're not used
Yeah.
to it. And though it's what we
Uh-uh.
want more than anything, it can cause a whole bunch of things to stir up in us and a bunch of insecurities to exist, or additional layers of armor because we haven't received it that way before and we don't know that
Yeah.
it's safe.
Yeah.
you back to back, when you were introduced to the head of the program, were seen and understood not just by this woman, but then immediately by him, because he
Yeah.
saw your brilliance and ripped out all the hurdles that could have existed for you to become a part of that program. So now
Yeah.
you're doubled down in momentum, and you're
Yes.
learning to trust, and you're opening yourself to opportunity, to new pathways, to literally unconventional thoughts around what an industrial design career could do for you. And
Yeah.
it led to the most meaningful relationship where you are seen in absolute. And it's a
Yeah.
beautiful love story, but I'd love for you to go down the path of how you and your husband met and bring us into the early stages of family life and really Pudge's early existence.
Yeah. So I'm at this major university, 30,000 plus students, and a lot of times education is very structured and rigid. And yet I'm in the product design department, which is kind of the opposite, it was very loose. And we would come together as students and the professor would say, okay, here's kind of the next project. Here are the constraints and the qualifications for the product that you need to design. And then the professor would disappear for like 2, 3, 4 weeks. And then all of a sudden we'd have to give a presentation. And so you're kind of left on your own to develop the concept, refine it, and like, and then prepare your presentation. Like that was kind of the next time we would see our professor. So I'm thrust into this program without going through any of the prerequisites. And all of a sudden I'm being tasked with inventing a digital camera. This was like 2001, 2002. And I'm sitting in the design studio and there's not a whole lot of direction and I'm just supposed to be drawing. And my head's like, what are you doing? Why are you here? They're going to find out you're not as great as all of these other students. Like I'm surrounded by students who have gone through the prereqs, who know what they're doing, who have more experience than me. And so I, like, once again, I'm feeling like the odd person out and I'm feeling very alone. I'm feeling invisible, feeling not good enough. And these two guys start noticing me and engaging with me and talking to me. And in particular, I remember I was designing it was a seating that was supposed to be used in an airport.
Mm.
And I called it Link. And this, again, this was like 2001. So the concept was this like really fun, kind of bubbly bench with 3 seats, and a laptop would pull out of the bench. And so I'm sitting there drawing and developing the concept, and these guys start talking to me, and one of them's married and one's not. And I'm starting to feel like, oh, these guys see me. Like they
Mm.
see that I'm different. They see that I have unique ideas and that I have a different perspective. And so it was like fun, and I would start to open up to them a little bit more. And I opened up my folder and I showed them some of the other concepts that I'd been working on and developing. And we're just talking and engaging. And pretty soon we start to develop a friendship. And one of them invites me to meet up in the library. He knows I haven't taken the prerequisites. His name's Ben, by the way, who he ends up being my husband. He invites me to the library. And he was like, he knew that the professors were not helping me and they weren't supporting me. And he was like, I can show you how to draw like a product designer. It's different than fine art, and you have to understand perspective and line weight. and
Yeah.
and so he would meet up with me in the library and he would teach me how to draw, and we'd sit on opposite ends of the table and we would just talk for hours. And pretty soon he started asking, what I was doing on the weekends, and he'd come over and again we'd sit on opposite ends of the couch and we would just talk for hours. And this was a guy who, after like 2 weeks of hanging out with him, I started to realize I know nothing about this guy. He sits here and he just asks me question after question about me. And this was new and different and
Mm.
interesting. And I was like, I don't know this guy. And yet I really like him. Of course I do, because he like seems to be interested in me. And long story short, we end up falling in love, getting engaged, getting married in like a few months.
I'm going to stop you there because I want to jump in a different direction for just a second, if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, all of what you just said is incredible about the path and the way he was able to come in and make you feel interesting because he was interested.
Yeah.
And being isolated and alone in the past and directing energy and attention from yourself and knowing you a little bit, you also ask really good questions. And my guess is at that point in life, you were the one who would inquire and be more interested than interesting. Is that true?
Yeah, I was definitely chasing boys like before then. I was chasing after guys. I was trying to be the people pleaser. I was trying to figure out exactly what they wanted and needed from me. And I was trying to mold and shape myself into that. And I remember a guy that I had dated before Ben, and I had confessed to him that I wanted to be a furniture designer. And he laughed at me, Brian, and
Oh
said,
man.
what kind of money are you going to make as a furniture designer? And you want to know the best thing? Like, I probably make exponentially more than that guy today.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you do. Yeah. Yeah, there's not a doubt.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't even know
Well,
what he's doing.
I was, I was coming out of experiences like that where anytime I would show any sort of my ambition and drive and my creativity, it wasn't really embraced up until that point by the other guys that I had dated.
And how long did it take you to get comfortable answering questions and talking about yourself?
I mean, it was it was definitely uncomfortable, but there was something about him that made me feel safe from the
Bingo.
very beginning. There was just something about him that I felt seen and I felt like I could be honest with him.
Yeah. Well, and the reality of it is, if we don't feel safe, we protect ourselves and then we disconnect from everything else. And when someone can facilitate a protected and connected space because of who they are and the energy and how they view you objectively and non judgmentally, but with empathy and compassion, it's amazing how people can open up and actually start to lean into who they are. And he started to facilitate that in you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the fact that we both had common ground and we were in the product design world and had made it through that elite
Yeah.
process to be there, I think in a lot of ways that helped me to feel safe
Yeah.
because we had that common ground.
You also talked about having fun. And fun
Yeah.
is something that I really associate with you. Like, if
Yeah.
something's not fun in my world, I don't want it in my world anymore. Just like anything that lacks depth, I'm not interested. Right. And so I'm constantly trying to find more fun in my life. What role
Yeah.
has fun had in your life? And what are the ways that you continue to explore fun?
I've looked at this a lot in my life because from a really young age, I just loved having fun and doing things that will light me up. And that's what I found in product design. Like on weekends, I would be in the studio as a student. I was in the studio working on my projects, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Like
Mm,
I didn't want to set it down. I didn't want to go do other things. And like it was fun and exciting for me. I had a girlfriend who was moving. I was like a sophomore or junior in college, and she was moving to Washington, D.C. She had just finished her degree in nursing. She needed somebody who could drive across the country with her and take a week off of school. And she asked me because she knew I would be all about that. I'm like, that sounds fun. So I did. I like set school down for a week and I drove to Washington, D.C. with her. And I think it's because having fun lights me up. And it's interesting though, because we haven't gotten here yet, but I eventually built a very significant business. And there were parts of me that believed that in order to be successful in business, I needed to be more serious. And so I started to hide the Katie who likes to have fun. And it was kind of a darker time in my life where life did get very serious and heavy. And I remember this time I was going to meet with Target at their headquarters in Minneapolis. And for whatever reason, I was doing this sales trip myself. A lot of times my husband would go with me. And this time I was doing it myself. And I'd just gotten an iPad, which was like a new thing. And I could bring my iPad, and I was laying in bed in my hotel room the night before the meeting, by the way, like when serious Katie would have been preparing for the meeting. And I was binge watching old Seinfeld reruns and eating peanut M&Ms. And I woke up the next morning with like a blue and red peanut M&M underneath me. I was like, who have I become? What is going on? And I could see how I had suppressed fun
mm,
Katie for so long, and my heart was just like, let me laugh. Let
yeah.
me let me let me do something unstructured for a moment.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a wake up moment, like, okay, you need to admit that fun matters to you, and you need to integrate it more into your life so that you don't have these moments of
Where
like,
you wake up with
how,
M&Ms on your back.
yes, yes.
Although that could be fun too. It just depends on how the M&Ms got there.
Hey, it
So,
was super fun. It was super fun.
uh, I actually appreciate that you went there. We're going to come back and get some different things, but I don't necessarily care about a linear conversation. I
Yeah.
want to jump to like a couple of points of relevance, and then we'll extract some other pieces that I know people need to hear. But for the time being, I vividly recall a story about, I think it was a combination of two different trade shows. One where I think it was your husband who reminded you of who you were after
Yeah.
watching you work the trade show room. And then second, as it related to the vision and standard that you saw for creating an incredible visual design that would then promote the design of the product that you were already creating. So can you talk a little bit about those moments of shift from serious Katie to fun Katie,
Mm-hmm.
and also extract some of those lessons of like when the first one flopped, how did you extract value from that experience to ensure the second one was what changed your life?
Yeah. So to get people up to speed, I had started a company. I was bootstrapping it. I had sold into about 25 boutique stores in the US. And I had a sales rep out of LA who once a year goes to a New York show and she sells to big buyers like Crate and Barrel, Pottery Barn, Nordstrom, Target. And she was like, look, I think your new concept is something they'd be really interested in, and you should come to the New York show. So, we were living on food storage. My husband was like barely taking enough side jobs just to make enough money. And then we were spending as much time as we could to try and develop this concept. And I had a couple different products and they were great. They were awesome, but they were not patentable. They were not like game changers.
Mm.
And we were developing a concept that would be patentable both domestically and internationally. And it would really change the game for my brand and like help it go internationally. So this was a big moment. And I was investing a lot of time, energy, and money to develop this concept. And keep in mind, we had two young boys. I was pregnant with our third. And, my husband was making maybe like 49,000 a year at his job. And like, we were living on hardly anything so that we could pour all of our resources into this company. We thought it was a big opportunity. So I like really put myself out there. I go to New York. I didn't even have money for a hotel. I asked a friend of a friend if I could sleep on their couch. And I like taking the subway to the Javits Center. I'm getting there on fumes with the hope that I walk away with purchase orders and I can start charging some credit cards.
Mm.
And it's all on the line. And long story short, like I have some amazing conversations with those store buyers, and they had a lot of questions for me. Like, what's your wholesale price? What's your retail price? Do you carry insurance for this? What are your lead times, case pack minimums? Like all of it. And honestly, I was way out of my league.
You were like,
Exactly. So I come home from this show with 0 orders, and it was devastating. Like I'm literally asking myself, how do we buy groceries to feed these boys? And I'm bringing another human into the world, and I can't even feed the 2 humans that are in my house. And my mind is just wondering, what is this all for? Like, Katie, how long are you going to keep pushing it like this? And so I came home feeling like a complete and total failure. And my husband and I can't even talk because the boys are bouncing off the wall and they're just so excited that mom's home. And he pulls me into the cold garage where we're surrounded by the prototypes, the dust, the samples, and like in my mind, all of the failure. And we're standing there in the garage and he's asking me all these questions about the show. How did it go? And I'm like, I have to confess to him, I'm like, look, nobody placed an order. We got 0 orders. Like they don't want this. And he kept asking me questions. And he was like, Katie, they didn't tell you no. I'm like, yes, they did. Like, get this through your mind. And he was like, no, they asked you questions that we just didn't have the answers to. So we just need to answer those questions and they will all buy this product. Answer those questions and we'll be shipping this thing all over the world. And Brian, like my reality said to me that what he was saying was crazy, but my body could not deny what I was feeling in that moment. And there was just this fire that was like, yes, this is who we are. We're not the people who just go with the flow and go live the same life that everybody else lives. Not that that's wrong, but that's just not how we're wired.
that's not who you
Who
guys
we
are.
are. Yeah. And so I made a decision to double down and move into crazy delusion zone is what it felt like at the time, and like really press forward. And so we did. And long story short, a year later, we took it to the trade show. And this time everybody bought. But what I wasn't expecting, and what you were alluding to, was at that point, my brain was starting to sabotage me, because my brain was saying, who do you think you are? You're not a real businesswoman. You don't have an MBA like the rest of these people. You have zero experience in business. Even though people are placing orders, how are you even going to start funding the purchase orders that you need to now place in Asia? And you don't know what you're actually doing. And so my mind was like attacking me. So even though externally what I wanted was starting to happen, internally I was starting to crumble. And luckily, I'm married to an incredible man. He could tell that I just was not there. I was going through the motions, not emotions. I was going through the motions, but I was not connecting with people. And in fact, I was pushing people off to him and my best friend who was helping, Diana, who was helping me out. So he pulls me aside and he was like, hey, where's Katie? And I like put on this fake smile. I'm like, what do you mean? Where's Katie? I'm here. What are you talking about? He was like, no, you're not here. And you're pushing people off onto me and to Diana. Like, how come you're not even talking to people? You're not even engaging with them. And I cracked open and I was like, they believe it. They think this is a real brand. They think this is a real brand and real products. And they don't know that I'm weaning our son right now to be here. They don't know that I don't have a business degree, that I don't really know what I'm doing, that I don't have funding for all these purchase orders. Like, they don't know all of that. And, I believed that I needed to be a quote real businesswoman, which the me of today is like, what does that even mean? But I thought I knew it meant something and I wasn't it. And thankfully, he said something really profound to me in that moment. He said, Katie, they're not expecting you to be something that you're not. They just want you to be Katie. Be Katie and ask them, do you want 25 or 50 tubs for your store? And when he said that, it took me back to that place of, oh, Katie's fun. Katie's genuinely interested in people. Katie loves solving problems in a unique and profound way. I can do those things. And so I walked back into the booth, and all I had to do with it, I didn't have to be something I wasn't. All I had to do was be Katie. And what's so cool on the other side of that, like, I crushed it, Brian. I crushed it. I closed everybody who walked into my booth, including a man who walked in. We started having a conversation. He's kind of skeptical and pushing back on me, and I was hanging in with him on the conversation. And he finally reveals to me that he's the CEO of Carter's, and he was really impressed with me and wanted my information, wanted to know if I was looking for investors, and like, I was just being Katie.
Yeah. And over 2,000 stores in 26 countries later, you're an award-winning designer and entrepreneur on so many levels. Yeah. But because the world was giving you narratives and messages that you were choosing to believe, which is typically don't feel, right?
Yeah.
When we don't feel, we push through and we push down. We get into motion like you talked about. Yes. But motion doesn't lead to human connection, because human connection without emotion isn't really human connection. And that's one of the things that I've always felt with you, is that you have an energy and a charisma and an empathy just in the way that you exist. And people can feel your heart and they can feel your authenticity when you aren't armored trying to protect whatever you don't want them to see. When you stand in your own, Katie, you truly are brilliant. You are unstoppable, and it's really incredible, but we're still human, and these things still happen. Yeah. And so what I love is you're really helping us understand the dynamics between the internal and the external factors of your experience. You're talking about the external people that pushed you down a path that maybe you didn't think you were going to go down. The way they allowed you to see yourself, the way they saw you, even in moments when you didn't believe, right? And what was brushed over, because we jumped right to the success and build as well, was truly you were living on food storage and you were making bread just so that your family could eat. Like you
Yeah.
were making your own bread. You
Yeah.
were
I was
trying to make
grinding wheat.
everything from scratch. I forgot you were
Yes.
grinding the wheat
I was
too.
grinding the wheat.
So, can you take us back to that moment and help me understand the narratives of the world that had conditioned you to believe that you just needed to be a wife and a
Yes.
mother,
Yes.
and how you started to take that turmoil and that struggle and really catapulted it forward? And I know there's one other person that really had a significant impact on you, which was a woman in that store. And I'd love
Yeah.
it if you could talk about that story because it's so resonant for so many women and mothers and wives.
Yeah. I love this. We all have this tendency. It's more than that. We walk and move through our life coming from a narrative that we have formed and created in our mind. And so from a really young age, I was forming this narrative, both using words and phrases that my parents or siblings or teachers had said to me, and also filling in the gaps of what I saw, right? And I would use what I saw, I would interpret what I saw and also form and create that narrative. And at that point in my life, I had created a narrative that my only place of significance and importance was being a mother and being a wife. And I had even developed that through my own faith and religion. At the time, I was active LDS Mormon, and I am still today. And I had interpreted this upbringing and the culture that I had seen, that a woman's place is in the home and in the home only. And so to dare to expand beyond that was terrifying for me. And I believed that if I'm going to be a righteous woman, that means I am first and foremost connecting to my husband and taking care of my children. And if I dare to step outside of that and
Who do
even
you
get
think you
help doing
are?
those, yeah, who do you think you are? Right. It felt like I was leaving God, faith, religion, husband, kids. Like it was terrifying for me at the time. And so I remember this moment where I was, my business was starting to take off. And I could see that it was going to keep taking off at an even faster rate. And I'm in this internal battle. And, the dishwasher's running, the kids are finally asleep. I'm sweeping up the kitchen. And my mind is trying to figure out if what I want is possible, because I had started to see a possibility of creating a significant business. And I really wanted that at this point. And yet, I was so scared that I might get 5, 10, 15 years down that road only to realize that that was a huge mistake. And that maybe that decision becomes the greatest regret of my life. Maybe I get so engrossed in my business that I don't develop a relationship with my kids, an emotional relationship, right? Maybe I get so engrossed in my business that it creates friction in my marriage. And I had seen a lot of proof and evidence of that for incredibly successful entrepreneurs. I had seen the wake of destruction sometimes that it can create for an entrepreneur. They become so obsessed with their business. And that terrified me because, yes, I wanted a successful business. I also wanted a strong marriage. I wanted a relationship with my kids. I wanted to continue to develop my relationship with God. I
And they
wanted to
don't
have
have to be mutually exclusive.
yeah, but see, at the time, I believe they were incompatible. And God taught me a new lesson in that moment as I was sweeping in the kitchen and my head was in this battle and my mind was saying, these worlds are not compatible. And what I saw in that moment was, Katie, creation. So while you might not see the woman who is capable of creating all of these worlds, you can go create her and become the woman who is successful in business and in her home. And so it started to become this design challenge and game where I was like, oh, cool. I don't have to be like some other woman that I've seen and generations of women. I'm going to be Katie, and I'm designing myself the woman who is capable of navigating this complexity in a way where she is successful in business and in her home. So that became my kind of challenge. But I want to share with you, you alluded to Meryl and Camus, because as I was in this, no man's land and starting my business and starting to wonder if I was going to be able to do it all, I like it was before I'd even started anything. I was just trying to keep my sanity and find something to do. I was living in the Pacific Northwest. I had 2 young kids. It was rainy a lot of the time, so to get out of the house was like nearly impossible. My friend had seen some products that I had made on my sewing machine, and she was like, "You should go see if they want to sell it at this boutique." So I'm just trying to get out of the house, keep my kids busy, and I go to this really high-end boutique. I immediately feel out of place because I'm pushing my son and a $9 stroller that I got at clearance at Target. My toddler I'm baby wearing my toddler in a sling that I made myself on my mom's 1962 Bernina. He's wearing shoes that I made and a hat that I made because I can't buy the things that I want. And I'm pushing my way through this store feeling so out of place and like I can't afford any of these things. And I noticed the store owner looking at me, and I'm like uncomfortable, and she comes over, asks if I need any help, and I'm just embarrassed. I can't even look her in the eyes. And she says, "Where'd you get all this stuff?" And I'm like, "What stuff?" I don't know what she's talking about. And she points to the shoes, the hat, the baby carrier, and I was a little bit shocked. And I was like, "Oh, do you like it? Because I made it." And she was like, "You made this?" And I said, "Yeah, I mean, I've got a sewing machine. I'm kind of a designer, and when my kids are taking a nap, I'll make stuff." And she was like, "You made this? I want you to make this for my store." And immediately all my walls go up, and I'm terrified. I'm like, "I don't have time. I barely had time to make these for my kids. Like, how am I going to make these for you?" And she said, "I go to all the trade shows, and like, this is hot stuff." And I'm giving her all my excuses, right? I don't have enough time. When would I do this? It would take me too long. And she's one of those people that was placed in my life. And she grabs me by the shoulder. She looks me square in the eyes. And this was a woman who was probably, I don't know, 65, but she looked like she was 80, heavy smoker, deep smoker voice, lots of wrinkles, dressed very beautifully though, and lots of sparkle. And she looks me square in the eyes and she said, "Look, I know that you have your hands full right now and you feel very busy, but it won't be very many years before these boys are going to be in school full time. And you're going to have a little bit more time on your hands. And you're going to look back and you will wish that you had done something with these gifts and these talents." Now, I don't know her story. I don't. Maybe what she was sharing was part of what she was feeling in her life, but she was right. And I knew internally that I was talented. I didn't have a lot of external proof. That's not totally true.
I was
We
just
talked
going to say,
about
you'd
it.
already, it just hadn't
But
broken
like
through all the layers of armor yet.
she saw me. She saw
Mm.
me and she helped me access that flicker of desire that I had to be seen. And she helped me kind of go into the future and experience the potential regret I would maybe feel
Yep.
someday if I didn't start doing something and building something now.
And that is such an incredible theory, because regret minimization theory that was popularized by Bezos, right, suggests that people on their deathbed never regret the things they tried and failed, but they always regret the things they never tried. And she was just trying to help you in that moment, center in that, and be very clear. What's the significance of that 1962 Bernina to you and your life?
It's a lot of things. Oh, why does it make me emotional? We actually live in Puerto Rico, and when we moved, we decided to not bring most things.
Did that make the trip?
It's in my closet.
I figured it was.
I think it's a connection to my younger self. It's also a connection to my mother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's an amazing woman. But she struggles to have an emotional connection with me, like I described.
Mm-hmm.
And creating and making, designing, sewing, it's something that I learned by watching her, and it's something that we share.
That's beautiful. You know, there's so many elements of sewing and creation that we can use analogies around, right? The threads that weave through our lives, the way that we can thread a needle, the way that we can allow ourselves to be more and more precise, but also realize that anything can be fixed and anything can be repaired. And clearly you've put yourself into a position where you've done that in your life. And when an example didn't exist for you, you created it for other women, and you're living that life today.
Yeah.
I think you've gotten very, very clear now, with all the hindsight and experience and perspective that you've gained, to be able to be a very effective mirror for others, like so many were for you. Can you talk about when and how you started to really be able to shift into your gift of reflection back to people, and how that started to move through your life, having your wins really be connected to other people's wins?
Yeah. So Pudge ended up becoming a really successful company. And, you mentioned we were sold in 2,000 stores in the US with distribution in 26 different countries. We've been featured on the Ellen Degeneres Show, the Rachael Ray Show, the Today Show. I've been really fortunate to be on the cover of Entrepreneur magazine with my husband. And we ended up selling and exiting that company 6 years ago. And as I was doing those things and navigating them powerfully, people would notice. And they were really curious about me and what kind of mother I was and what kind of wife that I was. And social media was starting to come on board, and you were starting to see a little bit more into people's personal life at the time. And so I would have people come to me basically saying, like, can I pay you to help me? And they just wanted help. And so without even really knowing what I was doing, I started to coach people. And it was fun. It was just like fun. It was easy. I would hop on a call for 1 hour. They would ask me all their questions, and I would share a new perspective with them. Like, at the end of the day, that's what I was doing. I could see the perspective that they had and how and why they were running into walls because of that. And so I would show them a new perspective, and I would share with them the stories, the experiences that I had that helped me see this new perspective, and then they would discover it. And then all of a sudden they could move past those obstacles in their life. So this was really fun and just easy. And so when we sold our company, it was interesting because all of a sudden I was really disoriented. I had this thing that had occupied so much of my time and my identity, and it was
I'm
now
so happy you went
removed.
there, because I was going to ask you a question about that. Oh,
And now it was removed, and it was like, holy cow, who am I now? And it was terrifying.
yeah.
And before, being a coach was this thing that I had done on the side. And now I had to ask myself, like, do I want to do this full time? Do I even want to take this identity on? And man, that was hard and scary. And I had plenty of crying sessions in the shower. It was like, who do you think you are? And who's going to come to you for help in their business? Just because you figured it out doesn't mean you can help them figure it out. And I went through all kinds of opposition in that space. But ultimately, I ended up making this decision to lean into a glimmer of talent that I had in this space. I didn't have a lot of proof, but there was some evidence that maybe I could get really, really good at it. And I made a decision, and I fully immersed myself into the coaching world. I hired a coach because that's what you do. And I spent 6 figures trying to learn this process of leading, inspiring, and teaching people in a way that it empowers them in their life.
Well, I think you absolutely have stepped into that role, and it's pretty incredible. I was going to ask you, who do you turn to for help these days?
God, first and foremost. I read scriptures every day. I pray a lot. My husband is a huge support in my life. He's like a silent partner in my business, and he and I meet every morning at 9:30. We talk about the day, the kids' schedules, where I need to carry a heavier load, where he needs to carry a heavier load, those kinds of things. He just walked into the room right now. Hi. And so, I lean on him a ton. And he's such a huge support. He's a man who can see my own walls, right? Because we need that outside perspective.
We do.
And then I also have a coach, I do, who helps me see how and where I get in my own way, my own thought patterns and habits that keep me from getting to where it is that I say I want to go. So I think it's really important to have that person who has that outside perspective, who can help you expand beyond your own limits.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I'm really fascinated by just who you are as a person and how you've learned to navigate life, right? You design it, you create it, you craft it, and then you reflect and refine from there.
Yeah.
And I know that this navigation has also given you an even greater ability, because it's almost as if you're just a built-in GPS, and you're often helping people by essentially being the GPS to help make sure that they don't lose their path and their navigation for their lives and business that they want to build. Can you talk a little bit about this navigation process and GPS, and really how you, one, developed it, but how you're infusing it in the lives of others?
Yeah. Oftentimes, as entrepreneurs and high performers, people who are really driven and visionary, we can have a clear picture of where it is that we want to go. And if we use that as like this point on a map that I'm trying to get to, in order for Siri to navigate me to that point, she actually needs to know 2 points, both where it is that I want to go, and she needs to know where I am. And oftentimes it's that second piece of where are you and telling the brutal truth of where you are. That's the piece that people oftentimes miss.
Bingo.
And I have developed an ability and a process for helping people better tell the truth of where it is that they are, so that they can have the clarity they need to get it to where it is that they want to go. So, understanding these 2 points, and then also making sure that there's meaning to where it is that you want to go. I think that, logic is great and awesome, but we have desires and emotions that are so powerful.
Yeah.
And if we can tap into that emotional reason why getting to that place matters to you specifically, it helps you navigate the difficulties, and it helps you see a new perspective. And we ask better questions when we understand that. So people need to know both where it is that you want to go and who you must be in order to get there. And that's what I help them navigate. And yes, there's lots of business strategy that comes into play there. But if you don't look at your internal world and understand how to build what it is that you want internally within you first, then you might start to get there, but you've not become the man, the woman that you need to sustain that life, and it slips through your fingers. And I've watched it happen for people. And so we build businesses from the inside out. And when you do it this way, what you want and the resources and the people, it comes to you. And it's not you chasing after anything. So that's kind of a really general big picture of what it is that I feel.
And what I really want to also hit on, just to make sure that if there's any nuance that this didn't land completely as it is, when you say helping develop who they need to be to fulfill this, what I actually believe about you is when you say who they need to be, it's actually getting to the core of who they already are.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if you want to go really deep, I know we only have a couple minutes left here, but I'll share just a window into something here. I believe that we are divine. I believe that we are infinite. And I believe that we have a creator that has placed certain gifts and talents and abilities inside of us. And with that, we carry a responsibility to choose what we want to do with these talents and abilities. And so I show people how to take what God has placed within you and how to use your agency to choose how you want to live these out. And do I want to go here or not? I believe that there is a future you.
Go there, Katie.
I'm just going to say this. Like we talk about an inner child and how, we can remember what it was like to go into kindergarten, or what it was like to, win the spelling bee or whatever. And when we remember, there's a visual, there's a feeling, there's a knowing that goes along with that. And I think there's an opportunity for us to do the same thing with our future self. Somehow, somewhere, in some dimension, I believe that she exists, and I just need to know her better. Yeah. And if I can come to know her and understand her greater, then I can invite her to be in my life now, today. And so it's it's starting to build a picture and a feeling and an emotion of that future self that exists in some dimension, and then making a decision today to be here now. It's
Yeah.
totally different than faking it. I'm not pretending anything.
Mm-mm.
I'm learning and understanding that future self, and then making a decision today to be her and not continue to repeat the
That's right.
thoughts, beliefs, and actions of the self of the past, which just has us getting stuck.
And ultimately, what you just hit on is the fact that the only thing real is the present.
Yeah,
Literally, the
it's
only
all
thing
about the
that's
now.
real is what's right here, right now. And so, by helping them become who they want to be, it's what I've told you in the past. The more I can be, the more I am. And it actually allows me to center myself to be the observer and the participant in my life real time, because that's the only thing that's real. And then, to your point, living and existing into who we want to continue becoming, recognizing that it's all about progress and process and continual evolution of self, because there is no final destination.
Yes. And and I know you
Go.
believe this, but I want to make sure everybody understands this distinction. It is very different than the game of becoming.
Yes.
Becoming has you believing that your impact, your significance, your importance, your opportunities are in the future, and they're perpetually in the future. And I
Mhm.
am about playing the game of being, which is in the present moment. It is
Yes.
now. I go into the future to learn, to gain knowledge and information, and I bring it back and I apply it to the now. It's different.
It's 1,000% what I agree. And I'm so
Yeah.
happy that you hit that point hard, because that's what I wanted people to walk away with from that point that you were driving. We do only have a couple more minutes left. I've got one more question for you,
Okay.
because I'm curious. If you look forward in your life to the next dot on your map that you need to navigate towards, what does that look like for you?
I mean, it's pretty specific right now. I'm building a business, but I'm doing it very different than the first business that I built. I want the greatest amount of impact and reach that I can get with the littlest amount of drain on my time. Like
Mm,
I want so much time freedom right now. And so me and my team are building a business right now where I can significantly impact people's lives, and I reach millions of people through them, but I'm only in conversation with like 10 people. And then I have a program where me and my team are in conversation with 25 people a quarter. And by doing that, I reach a lot of people. And yes, I make very good money also. And most of that money stays in my pocket, by the way. Like that's the kind of business that I'm building, where there's very little investment and output that I have to put into the business.
other than
And
time.
other than time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm going to ask, even though you've dropped so many layers of wisdom and gold in here, is there a closing thought you want to leave people with?
Yeah. Thank you for inviting that. I know that if you're listening to this, it's because you have dreams. You have a vision of a greater life, business, or future than where you're currently at. And sometimes we can get really stuck. And in that stuck place, we can start to question ourselves and maybe even lose hope. And I would just say to you, if you're in that place where you've been trying to achieve or accomplish something in your life that you haven't been able to achieve, know that in that moment, you just need somebody who believes in you and who sees you. And while I might not know you, you just need to know that Katie Richardson, mother of four, creator of a multi-million dollar international business, coach to high performing entrepreneurs who pay six figures a year to work with me, living in Puerto Rico, I believe in you. And so in those moments of doubt and fear and wondering and wanting to pull back and retract, you can move forward on my faith and knowing that you can do it and you got this.
I love it, Katie. Thank you so much for being with us. For everyone else, you can leverage and lean on and borrow other people's strength until you develop your own. Katie clearly flipped her lid and she went inside, and she's continued to scan her can throughout her life to unpack the trash from her past that's kept her stuck, that created narratives of belief that could have maintained this existence of isolation, disconnection, and never being enough. But because of a few individuals who spoke life into her, who saw her and understood her, it gave just enough light and just enough strength in those moments for her to move. She just gave you a challenge to borrow her strength to make sure that you continue to move. But I can tell you right now that faith alone won't get there. It's going to require the work from you that might make you feel like trash and might make you feel like garbage, because the only way to unpack it is to feel it so that you can heal it. Human connection doesn't exist without emotion. And truly, Katie is an example of what's possible. When an example in the world doesn't exist for you, build it, create it, live into it. And the power of your story and impact will become exponential and infinite in a way that you'll not even be able to measure. But it all comes back to you being you in this moment. One moment, one breath at a time. So until next time, keep flipping your lid and scan your can.